need to somehow find that balance that sometimes it's a very touchy, almost, dangerous balance of truth and love. You feel like if you're too truthful, you're going to be unloving, or if you're too loving, then you're like, but now I'm sacrificing the truth. And so I think that's where the church is at today in this conversation. Mackenzie, you were saying that you had a friend recently that came out. What was your initial kind of response when you first found out about that?
I had a friend actually throughout high school, my friends and I, we kind of built this family around each other. We all had different backgrounds, we all had different struggles and pains, and we were all going to the same church, involved in the same youth group and everything. And I had this friend actually who, we had kind of thought that he was homosexual. We didn't really know for sure. And he ended up that he was, but he couldn't come out and actually say that to us. He was so ashamed, or I wouldn't say he was ashamed of who he was, but he was so afraid of our reaction to him coming out of this. And so he actually had his friend tell us, he couldn't even face us himself, because he was afraid of what we would think of him. Okay. And when he had told us, or when we had found out, I wasn't sure exactly how to react, because, it's a touchy subject, because I am a Christian. Mm-hmm. In fact, I'm a preacher's kid. So I'm just supposed to be this, whatever, perfect kid, whatever. Yeah. And so it was really difficult to figure out how I wanted to face the situation, how I wanted to treat him, or if I should treat him differently, because the Bible does say, you look at Sodom and Gomorrah, and God is very clear on the subject of that he thinks that it's wrong. He built, a man and a woman, it's not supposed to be homosexual. And so it was just kind of difficult, because he has gone to youth group, he's been involved in the church, for him to kind of think that it was okay. But you had to find that balance of acceptance and, like you said, love, loving who he is as a person, and yet the truth of this is not supposed, this is wrong. So it was just kind of, you have to really, I think that the church is just so shameful on the subject, and that people can't even come to the Christians and say, hey, I have this, I believe this, what do I do about it,
So how's your relationship now with your friend?
Yeah, we're fine. He, nothing's changed. Nothing has changed at all. We still hang out all the time, and I've moved, obviously, so it is a little more distant, just because of, life taking its toll. But, nothing changed throughout that process of him saying that he was homosexual. There was no, from anybody, from any of us, from the friends and the friendships that we had, no one really treated him any differently. We want to embrace people into the church,
right.
and not shame them out of it. Mm-hmm. And so I think that it's important to state, yes, I believe this is wrong, but to still accept them, mm-hmm. and to understand their point of view and mm-hmm. their lifestyle.
Yeah, that's you said the line, to shame them out of the church.
Yeah.
You just said that kind of off the top of your head, but that captures the experience of so many people I know that are gay, lesbian, transgender. They were raised in a church, and that's exactly, I don't know if they've used those same words, but they felt shamed out of the church.
Yeah.
And again, I've met only a few people that said, it was the church's biblical stance against same-sex relations. That's why I left. Usually it's not that. Usually I felt shamed, isolated, dehumanized, unloved, felt weird, people were so weirded out with me, or even they mocked me, and that's why it was that shamed out of the church. So that's not an uncommon story, which is unfortunate. Marky, you were saying earlier how you feel like it's hard to have space to even kind of talk about this. What's been your experience? Yeah.
We have a friend who is bisexual, and when she came out to me at first, because she knew before me, I found out our friend in 8th grade, and in 8th grade, that's not something that really kids talk about. It's not, you don't hear about it. It was happening in the world, but it wasn't in 8th grade. Okay. It's not something that's happening. And so it kind of took me off guard, but at the same time, it was okay, I'm just going to move on and not really talk about it, but it has followed us throughout high school, and I mean, like, sometimes you don't even realize that people are homosexual until they actually tell you. Like, my neighbor, we've lived next to him since I was born and everything, and like we never even knew. And then like one day it was like slipped into the conversation, and we're like, "You are?" And he was like, "You didn't know?" Like, no, we never even. I never even thought. Exactly. I think that if I can marry a man and love him, then someone else should marry who they want to and love them. But I also want to stay true to my faith, because the church is, you know, I love the church. I've grown up in the church and everything. I've gone to Catholic school since I was in preschool, and I want to stay true to it, but I also don't want to shame people like she said. I want people to feel accepted, and I think that society still is like shaming people, and I don't want people to feel shamed for who they are.
You said you guys were, you know, part of a youth group. You went to the same church. How did the church react? Like, did his youth pastors find out?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. The church itself didn't really react. The youth pastor was actually giving a message one night about how Christians should handle homosexuality, you know, what the Bible says. He was going through all of the different, you know, verses and the different things that is put out there on social media, and he actually did a message on homosexuality, because it's either not spoken about or it's like a fight, and it's spoken like with fists aimed high, you know. And so he just kind of went through and just said kind of the basic things that are said in the Bible. And actually it was a couple weeks after that my friend had come out. He went and told the pastor that night, the youth pastor that night, before he told any of us. And he said, you know, I am gay. I feel that this is wrong, and had a conversation. It was a private conversation, so I don't know exactly what the reaction was, but he was definitely not, he was not told never to come back to youth group. In fact, he was embraced even more. You know, we were like, hey, make sure that you're coming back, you know. It was not something that was like a bad thing. It was not something that, I mean, we did voice our opinions on why we think that it's wrong, but we didn't tell him that he couldn't be that way, or that he was confused, or that he wasn't thinking clearly, or anything like that. That's not what we were even close to being about. You know, we were more like, okay, well, you know our opinion on it, you know where we stand, we do believe it's wrong, but we're not going to treat you any differently. And I think that that's really important within the church too, is that, you know, we talk about wanting to bring people to Christ, and we talk about wanting to be like Jesus, and we talk about wanting to be this, you know, great community. But when a controversial subject is brought up, we tend to like cower in the corner and be like, oh, that's wrong, you can't come near me, you know, like, oh, you are a sinner, you know. But I think if the church would be even more open to, you know, stating their own problems, stating their own troubles, stating their own sins, then maybe we could reach out to more people that way too.
When your friend came out, and you said that, you know, you made it clear where you stood and everything. Like there's no unclarity about how the group as a whole felt about homosexuality. At the same time, you went out of your way to say, you know, you're one of us. We're not going to treat you any differently. We accept you. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty like rare response. Usually, it's tilted on one side or the other. Did your friend? Did he feel? Do you think he felt like I know they kind of agree to disagree, but I truly feel loved? Would you say he felt like that, or?
I think it's an awkward situation. I remember at first it was kind of awkward. Okay. But I do remember one of our friends had told the group as a whole that he was homosexual. We were like, you know, we understand. Like we do believe it's wrong, but we understand. And we ended up texting him like, hey, it's all good and everything. Like, you're not going to be treated any differently. We're not going to exclude you from us or not ever want to see you again. And he actually ended up coming over like right after that, and it was kind of like this awkward thing, like there was an elephant in the room and we weren't going to talk about it. And so he came over, but we couldn't, like, there was almost like this, we couldn't really talk directly to him about it. And it was definitely an awkward situation at the first start of it, but you know, he still, to this day, goes to church. He's still involved, you know, with us. It's no different. It was an awkward situation at first, though. It was, you know, but I do believe that he felt like it was okay, you know, like what our goal was not to let him think that homosexuality was okay, but to let him know that he was okay by us, that we weren't going to, just not want to see him again or anything like that.